Alrighty. Okay. Well, folks, again, I appreciate you hopping on. I am Gustavo Munoz. Friends call me Gus. You'll actually see on almost all my emails and calls I go by Gus. Wanted to thank you for sitting down today. Thanks for connecting with BusPlanner. This is a part of our monthly webinar series. So once a month, I get the great pleasure of hosting webinars, talking with different folks across the country on different transportation topics. So of course, I'm talking from BusPlanner, but we do try to make this as agnostic as possible. We want to talk about general interesting concepts in transportation, interesting concepts in transportation that are useful for folks. And one that seems to be popping up a lot recently, whether it's school boards reaching out or it's transportation teams reaching out or superintendents, it's the time of year where redistricting is a big thing. You're starting to think about, all right, if we're opening up new schools, if we're closing schools, if we're rebalancing the load between schools, if we're shifting boundaries, we're absorbing other parts, neighboring areas, changes to our demographics, all of this sort of gets considered around this time of year as decisions get made for the future. All right. So again, appreciate you hopping on. We've got a pretty jam-packed agenda today. So I want to make sure that we're covering a number of topics, but I do leave room here at the end for a Q&A. Now, there is a chat function, so you can ask questions throughout. I won't be able to see them, though, as I'm sharing my slides. We'll save those for the end, unless it's something super pressing that you ask for right now. My team here, Maria, will help me answer those questions. And so today, when we're going through the agenda, we have what is the impact of redistricting? What are the triggers? Like, how does this start going? We talk about hidden challenges, so things to keep an eye out for. Data for planning. So what sort of data do you need to make informed decisions around redistricting? Scenario modeling. So making a plan and then seeing what the different iterations of those plans could be. As redistricting is discussed, as we talk about new schools or school closures, it's a very political decision. There's a lot that goes into it. And so school boards have a lot to consider, and it's important to have transportation in that seat helping out, or to have a seat at the table so that we can model the different scenarios and how that actually affects you. And I'll share some stories on that I've been encountering. We'll talk about stakeholder communication as well. Long-term effects, so what happens with redistricting, contingency planning, so in case anything changes at the last minute, how do we plan for alternatives? And then we'll go into the Q&A at the end there. Alrighty, so without further ado, we'll get right into it. So let's talk about the impact of redistricting on transportation. And so there are a number of things that kick off to have districts start exploring, right? Again, it's a change in demographics. Maybe it's new bond money, right? We're going to open up some new schools. Maybe it's enrollment is super low in one area and super high in another. So you have some schools that are over capacity and you have some schools that are under capacity. We want to balance those loads. Sometimes it's the area is growing like weeds, leaps and bounds. And so we need to add new locations or we need to divvy up that pot more. And sometimes it's school closures. The schools, unfortunately, they're under enrolled. And so we have to go and move those students to a new area. And so those are all really key critical things that kind of jumpstart this process, right? So we talk about financial outcomes, right? So a new facility has been approved. We talked about enrollment changes. So again, students coming and going. We talk about equity as well. So making sure that students have access to a great education. That's really important. All right. Transportation is usually not the reason why redistricting starts, right? Usually it's made, superintendent, school board starts exploring. There's budget reasons. There's these demographic regions. But transportation has a lot to do with how this actually gets executed. And so folks will bring in consultants. They'll start exploring, hey, what does it look like if we change these boundaries, if we add this school, if we take it away? And oftentimes transportation doesn't get included until the very end. The point of today's webinar and what we're trying to talk about here is to help give you the data, help give you the right sets of questions to ask so you can go and get that seat at the table, so you can advocate for yourself. And across the country, I see it to different extents. Sometimes transportation is immediately given that seat at the table. Sometimes transportation is excluded, and you might fall somewhere in between. What's important for us, though, is that you have all the tools to advocate for yourself. And so when we talk about these changes just to the schools and the boundaries, it's also important for us to talk about other things that are affiliated, right? Route times, staffing changes, right? Driver shortage, sometimes that's a part of the need. Bell schedules changing. So your early ins, your early outs. Maybe you start doing a breakfast program, so your elementary schools need to get in earlier. All of that also fits into this fold of redistricting and the changes that are coming. So when we talk about those triggers, we talk about, again, the decline or uneven growth across the district. We talk about facility changes, so openings, closures, or consolidations. We talk about capacity, overcrowding or underutilized facilities, right? So checking that demographic information. We see shifts in programs, right? So magnet schools or private schools popping up. In some areas, public schools have to service transportation for those students, and that shifts a lot. That's a whole different can of worms, right? But that in turn is affecting transportation and some of the boundaries of these school districts. And of course, equity and compliance. So pressure from the community, you'll see it across the country. Parents coming and speaking at school boards, asking for changes, asking for realignments, asking for their students to traverse across the other side of the county to go to a different school. So all of this gets factored in, and all of this is political in nature. And so these decisions that are being made from the top, from school board to superintendents, have very wide-ranging impacts. And a lot of those impacts are felt on the shoulders of transportation. But not always just this like policy choice, but we should actually double click on that, like on policy requirements. There might be changing federal guidelines, there might be changing state guidelines, county guidelines, etc. So things to keep an eye out for. Okay, so let's talk about transportation realities that are often missed. These are little things that occur that are not always factored in during a redistricting process. So let's think about some of the second order effects when a change occurs. If a boundary shifts, even a small boundary shifts for a school, that can have pretty meaningful changes to your ride times. And I'll take an example here. So at BusPlanner, I have the great blessing where I get to talk to school districts, consultants, contractors. I get to talk to people all over, up and down the transportation industry, and I love it. But I spoke with one consultant recently that was telling me about a district that wanted to work with them, where they were saying, "Hey, we have a number of preschool programs across the area, and wouldn't it be awesome if we consolidated all those preschools or all those preschool classrooms into one sort of unified location in the middle of the county? Wouldn't that be great? We can consolidate all the services, we can consolidate the teaching staff." So from a school board level, that sounds great, right? Yeah, we're going to bring everything together. We're going to save some money. But from a transportation perspective, that kicks off every red flag in my head immediately. Because what does that mean? It means I'm going to have buses that are now going north, south, east, west, all over the county, maybe potentially out of county as well. Maybe we're doing some McKinney-Vento, like even across state lines in some parts of the country. And so we're going to different areas. And then we have to do all these double backs. I won't be able to fill the buses. My bus occupancy goes lower. My deadhead time goes up. All of that for what looked like an efficiency on paper is a really different or really not an efficiency. It's an inefficiency for transportation. And so even a small boundary shift can greatly increase those ride times. So kids that would have been bused to a school nearby to do their pre-K are now going to be on the bus for 30, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, getting to the center of the county. And think about it, in the morning, we already don't have enough bus drivers, right? Or most places have a driver shortage. So now you're taking up more time for the drivers. And the kids are sitting on those buses for a lot longer. And we know that is not great either. Redistricting has two heads to it. So in that scenario, we're going to increase the number of buses that are going to be ridden. We're going to increase the ride time of the students. We're probably going to increase how unhappy parents can be. So that has real cost of transportation. But in some ways, there are areas where redistricting helps with consolidating routes and reducing transportation or reducing the number of runs that you have to do in the morning or in the afternoon. So there's two sides to the coin, and that's why it's important to model these things. Not just, hey, is it going to increase 10 bus routes to my area, but maybe there are some consolidations you could do. In the inverse of that example I gave of the preschools all trying to merge, there may be an area that has all the preschool services in one place, and it might make sense to divvy those out amongst the different elementary schools across the county, depending on how many elementary schools there are, right? And that's why it's so important to model these things. But the smallest little change or the smallest idea, what sounds good on paper, can have really big lasting effects. And it's important to keep an eye out for those. And we'll get into that in a bit as well. But let's talk about bell schedules as well. So bell schedules may conflict with new areas. It's possible you open up a new school and that school has a different bell time, or it's tied to an elementary school bell time, but it's on, again, the other side of the county. And so having those bell times be the same means I no longer have the ability for my buses to go back and forth to do a double back or do a multi-tier system. So now I'm running single bus lanes, right? That is very bad from bus occupancy and from a dollar cost perspective, right? That means I need a lot more buses. One thing there's often oversights in transportation around special needs when redistricting is being discussed. So if we're talking about, hey, let me upload all of my student demographics, let me put them all on a map in a system like a BusPlanner, right? And let's see where they are. You do want to flag your special needs transportation because we know if bus ride time is important to keep low. We know in special needs, it's even more important to keep that bus ride time lower, right? So you also want to flag your special needs, your ESC population, and what are the constraints that they have, right? And what's important when we're doing this modeling, that we're not just factoring, hey, how many kids are going to start going to this school, but also how am I going to service the special needs students that are going to a new school? And driver and fleet capacity don't scale. Everyone knows this, right? This is right now, there's a driver shortage across most of the country. It's all nice and dandy to go and, talk about, hey, we'll do this preschool program that I was discussing earlier, but you can't just find 10 new drivers overnight, right? It would be awesome. I think people really want that, but there's just not that capacity right now. And there's a lot of really good work that's being done across the country to alleviate the driver shortage. And some places are really resolving it. And I think that's going to be a future webinar topic. But unfortunately, we can't just snap our fingers and 10 new drivers show up. And so it's important to have those calculations as a part of your modeling and your boundaries. All right, so we've reached the first poll. Let's talk, what's your biggest concern when it comes to redistricting and transportation? And Maria, would you mind launching the poll here? Wonderful.
Looks like split between route efficiency. Oh, never mind. Route efficiency is ahead right now, Gus.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Bell schedule conflicts. That's a big one. Stakeholder communications. Nothing yet for it. Data availability and accuracy. Very interesting. I agree. Efficiency is definitely top of mind. Cost impact is increasingly top of mind, particularly in the budget climate we're in across the country. Bell schedule conflicts, though, are key, right? Unfortunately, we can't have all of our buses do negative slack. We can't have them doubling back all over the place. They can't be. We want them to double back all over the place, but unfortunately, we don't have a cloning device yet. So we can't have them be in two places at once. And those conflicts are really important to nip those in the bud. But we shouldn't discount stakeholder communications or the data availability as well. Again, redistricting is a very political thing. When you go through this process, it is very important to have the goodwill and the buy-in from parents. And that's kind of out of transportation's realm, to be honest with you. But transportation's decisions will impact those. And I already think transportation folks get too many phone calls from parents. So trying to reduce that as well through advanced communications, open settings for these decisions, I think goes a long way. All right, let's talk about the data needed for effective planning. Let's say school board starts talking about redistricting. You hear it, they come to you. Maybe they don't come to you again. What we want to do is we want you to get that seat at the table. So advocate. Let's talk about what data you need to actually make a good decision here. So what do districts usually have? They have enrollment counts. So you know how many kids are in your district. You know school capacity. So you have a list of, here are the list of my schools. Here's how many kids fit in those schools based on how many teachers we have, et cetera. And then you have a general planning model. So this is my area, right? You have this map of the area, like in your routing software. But what does transportation need to make an informed decision? You need to know exactly where those kids live. So address ranges are fun and all, but they don't get you the nitty-gritty accuracy of where you're supposed to actually pick these students up. New subdivision goes up, you need to know that subdivision's there because that'll obviously impact your modeling. You need to know about stop level demand. So how many students are actually riding on my existing stops? To be able to identify that, you want to be able to track whether that's, a scanning system, a QR code, RFID, what have you, or just messages from your bus drivers, right? It's important to know demand for your stops. If you're going to go broaden out in a new area and you have a number of overcrowded stops, that's an important thing to flag. Might be you need to create some new stops as you're pulling in this new area or you're opening up this new school to relieve the stress, not have stops that have 60 or 70 kids loading up on them. Sometimes there's no way around it, don't get me wrong, but you want to be able to flag that to make those decisions. And then let's talk actual ride times. So you need to know how long those kids are sitting on the bus for. You kind of have to know your numbers cold. So you should be able to pull reports of, here's my bus count, here is my student count, here is the total hours that my kids ride, here are the total miles that my kids ride, here are my deadheads, this is my AM, this is my PM, This is my midday if you're doing middays. What's my average bus occupancy? What's my average seat time or ride time for these students? What are my peaks and troughs? What is the shortest amount of time a student is riding? What is the longest amount of time my student is riding? Have a report as well for all of my kids. In different parts of the country, they have hard rules on this. A student can't ride for more than 60 minutes unless it's necessary. Like if the student lives super far, then that's a different story. But students in general shouldn't ride for more than 60 minutes. In some places, it's 90 minutes, right? So you should have a list of all of those exceptions as well. Because if that exception count goes up when you're modeling new boundaries, you got to be able to flag that. That's important. Or if your average bus occupancy goes down, or if it goes up, or if the just general ride time goes up, or your miles goes up, or your hours go up, all of those have real costs associated. From a student perspective, they're sitting on the bus longer. That's not always great for students. From a dollars and cents perspective in transportation, you need to know, hey, okay, here's my current state. In these potential 5 different changes that we're suggesting, what will happen? If my dollars go up, right, more overtime for drivers, that's a lot of money. More fuel, more wear and tear on the buses. I might have to write off my buses over a shorter period of time because I'm putting more miles on them, right? Maybe I need to go buy more buses more quickly. I mean, all of that's going to be impacted by the decisions you make in redistricting. And so you got to know these numbers cold. You got to be able to pull them. You got to have them handy, and you have to model them. Not just what does it look like on the map, but what do these real changes mean for my statistics, for my routing statistics, for my transportation department's budget? And of course, the last one, I'll talk about it a lot today, and I'll talk about it a lot for the rest of my, I don't know, the rest of the week. Fleet and driver availability. You do need to model how many drivers do I have today? If I change these boundaries, how many drivers will I need? And so it's really cool. And in a system like BusPlanner, we have modeling tools for that. It's really cool to see like the supply and demand curves in real time. But you got to know those numbers cold, people. Print them out, get really comfortable with them, know them like the back of your hand. Because when I think about it from a school board's perspective, the school board, and I have a friend on the school board talking about how he thinks about, redistricting and transportation changes. And he was telling me from a school board's perspective, give me the data, because this is going to be a political decision. If we're going to open schools or close schools or what have you, some parents are going to be happy and some are going to be pretty upset. You need to know the numbers cold to make that decision and go forward with it. And to get those numbers cold, you need to be able to pull it and then share it with your leadership, share it with your superintendent, share it with your school board, get your seat at that table. It really needs precise data. Sometimes you can't get precise data. Sometimes all you can get is projections. If you're in a growing area, you can presume, hey, we're projected to grow 3% year over year as we've been doing for the last 5 years. That happens all the time. But in your true day-to-day, you want to see how it changes your direct routing right now, your direct need for buses right now. You've got to have those numbers. It is very, very critical. All right, I have another poll. I'll get off my soapbox here for a second. What data do you wish you had better access to when planning for boundary changes? And so we'll open this poll back up. All right. I'm seeing some interesting ones in here. The options are student level geocoding, real-time ride times, fleet capacity data, and cost projections. As we talked about, what data do you wish you had better access to when planning for boundary changes? The cool things about polls is that I get a little water break. Alrighty. And so I am seeing, it looks like real-time ride times wins. So the data that most folks wish they had when they're planning for routing changes or boundary changes is how long are those students going to sit on the bus? Students sitting on the buses for a long time is not great for a number of reasons. There's a lot of data on this, right? And I'm sure you folks know, but just to recap, chronic absenteeism goes up. Unhappy parents goes up. That means more phone calls. That means not just phone calls to transportation too, but parents on Facebook calling the school board, calling superintendent. It's not great for anyone. And of course, students are tired. They're sitting on the bus for so long. And sometimes, you get rowdy kids on the bus as well these days. And so all these things, we want to reduce ride time. We can't always do that because of budget constraints, but we should be always factoring into it, right? We should always be considering it. And so when you're doing these models and you're projecting, hey, what does it look like to open a new school or close a school? Or what does it look like to change my bell time? You should have a tool like in your routing software that can help you match that can help you see what those changes would affect. What do my kids actually, how long are they routing for? And you should have optimizers around those things. Say, how do we create new stops, or how do we factor our existing stops to reduce the amount of time that they're on the bus? Okay, now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. Let's talk about modeling scenarios and how transportation fits into the song and dance of redistricting. So I'm going to get back on my soapbox. When we're talking about knowing your numbers cold, you need to establish a baseline. So you need to know today's data. Again, current costs, current routes, ride times, average bus occupancy, deadheads, my total miles, my total hours, how much overtime I'm paying, anything you can get your hands on. We got routing statistics is what we call it here at BusPlanner. You need to be able to pull all your routing statistics. Then within a map, pull in different shape files or pull in different models to say, okay, look, if we change this area for the elementary school, what does that look like? If we divvy up this school that's going to be closed, how does that impact the ride times? How does that impact my costs for the surrounding area? If we're going to consolidate the school, remember, bring everything into one place, how does that impact it? If we're going to open up a number of new schools, and we're going to rebalance that load, what does that look like? How do we alleviate the schools that are over capacity, right? You should be able to model out those numbers. So as you play around with new models, as you pull in new parts of the map and you say, hypothetically, if this was my new map moving forward, how does this affect my costs, my miles, etc.? You need to know those numbers cold too. That helps you have that seat at the table, helps you make the data-driven decision. So when I was talking about school board member, from their view, what they want to do is they want to make a decision and they want to make sure the numbers are hard. Like they know those numbers golden, because they're going to have to face the backlash from the community if there are changes, right? And if they can point to data and they can point to numbers and say, this is why we made this decision, it's going to be better for everyone. That's easier to have that conversation. It's easier to stomach. It's easier to get through that when you know your numbers cold versus just a gut feeling, right? If the school board is just creating an area by fiat or based off gut feelings, it's not going to stand up to so much scrutiny if you get an angry parent that's reaching out to you, right? So know those numbers and test the constraints. So as you model it out, check your ride time limits, put hard caps on those ride times. So I was talking about, again, all over the country, it's different, but in some places they have hard limits, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. Your district might have its own rules. Your state might have its own rules. Generally though, as a concept, check to see all of your violations. Check to see everyone that's gone over those 60 or 90 minutes. Pull that in a report. When you've gone over that and you have that list of students, do what you can in your modeling changes to see how you can reduce those things. Or if you can't, you go and you show that to your leadership like, hey, if we enact scenario one, all of a sudden the amount of kids that are riding on the bus for over 90 minutes skyrockets and we have got 100 or 200 kids, that's a big no-no, right? Test how it impacts your staffing as well. So model that. Your system, like a bus planner, we have a supply and demand curve. So you can see how that actually impacts the total number of drivers I need. And then check against operational reality. So again, pull all those statistical analyses. Use those optimizer tools. Again, in a bus planner, we have like a multiple databases you can use. So you can have your existing database, but then you might have a different database that's just for redistrict modeling. And this is my scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and check to see how that impacts. Then provide feedback. So this is important as well. To have transportation have this seat at the table, it is important for transportation to give the hard numbers. If we do this change, school board, our costs will go up X dollars. I will need Y more drivers. Or I will save Z dollars because we've consolidated. Again, there's two heads to it. It could be good, or it could be more bus routes, it could be less bus routes, right? It's one thing to just say, hey, we can't do this because I've seen this, my kids riding for more than 90 minutes just skyrocketed. But it's another thing to take that message and instead of just saying no as a veto, to get your seat at that table by saying, here's what I think if we changed it around would help me refine this. And so try and enter that collaborative culture. Share your opinions. There's a lot of hands or a lot of, what's the phrase? There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen or a lot of chefs in the kitchen in a process like this. And again, there's a lot of steps to it. It's very political. But it's important to have transportation seat there. And feel free to share your opinions and share your feedback based on that data because you know the numbers cold now. So transportation, I included that at the bottom there. Transportation should inform, not just validate. So transportation shouldn't just be like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but it should be actually guiding the conversation too. Doesn't always happen that way. But knowing your data allows you to advocate for yourself and get that seat at the table. Right. Another poll. Does your transportation team currently have a seat at the table during redistricting discussions? In some places, they're looped in from the very get-go. In other places, it feels like it's kind of just dropped to them in the last second. How do you folks feel about that? So another poll, a yes, a no, a sometimes, or we're trying to get one. Seeing some votes in here. Beautiful. Ready. Okay, it looks like sometimes has won. So when we talk about, does your transportation team currently have a seat at the table during redistricting discussions? Sometimes is the winner. I would like it all to be yes across the board. But I'm glad I'm a little heartened by there's only a handful of no's. So I'm glad there's a number of sometimes, but we do want those all to be yeses, folks. And the takeaways and the documents I'll share with you after this, sort of my checklist, I think help with that quite a bit. All right, let's talk about stakeholder communication and community impact. So common concerns, and I know I sound like I'm beating the horse here, but it's important to note longer ride times. If you're expanding, you're opening a new school, and you have to go pull people from the other side of the county, that's a longer ride time. Or the stop location changes. I hear this one all the time. Hey, I've been riding on this bus stop or this bus stop has been here for the last 15 years. I didn't know we were going to change it. Why did we change it? And it turns out if we didn't change it, we couldn't consolidate one of our routes. Oftentimes there are stops that exist just because they've always kind of existed, and that's your own prerogative, right? That's the thing. In some places it stays that way, but when we talk about optimizations and we talk about reducing that ride count or ride time, or we talk about alleviating some of these stresses of the driver shortage, sometimes the stop locations have to change. Particularly if you're going to a new school or if your school is closing, sometimes we got to find a better place to aggregate more people to get them on the bus or to do transfers or what have you. Routing software helps with that, right? And let's talk about service reliability concerns. So a parent might be used to a specific stop, but they might be worried about the consistency or the frequency of the bus transporting there. That's why it's important to have parent communications in advance. It's also important to continue to have parent communications, like a messaging system to parents or a parent app or a website where parents can go get information. The more touch points you have and the more updates you get, the more you feel like you put people and bring them in and pull them in the loop, the less of those concerns you're going to get over time because it's a big change, right? So let's talk about communication strategies. Data. It's my top 5 points. But using graphs helps quite a bit. So having a graph generator, having reports, whether it's a white paper or an email that goes out with a breakdown of the way you're considering the changes. The school board will have their own approach, right? Oftentimes they have an open setting for public comments. So they want folks to be a part of that. But really, you want every tool in your toolbox as a part of that communication. And you want to be able to share that with leadership as a part of their communication strategy. The changes can be scary sometimes, right? You're closing one of my local neighborhood schools that's been around forever. That can be cause for concern. Unfortunately, though, the budget realities sometimes need it. And other times, we're closing an old school and we're opening up a new one down the way, and it's going to be a nicer building, and we passed a bond, and it's going to be awesome. But it's still change, and ultimately, change is a big thing. So you have to ease folks into it. Align your messaging with leadership. So again, when we're talking about transportation having a seat at the table, it's really important that you speak the same language as leadership. So if your school board's saying one thing, you do want to toe that line. You do want to make sure that you're helping inform that message and everyone's saying the same thing. Because I think a big part of where this can go awry is when folks start saying one thing on one side of the school district and they're saying another thing on the other side. That causes confusion. In the throes of confusion, parents start making up their own ideas. All of a sudden, you get messages all the time. The more in tune, the more clean the presentation, the more unified the presentation, the easier it all goes. And then you want to build that trust with transparency. So this kind of all ties back to communication, but be an open book. Communicate as much as you can. That soothes people's fears of change, and that generally makes the whole process go better. You might find as you're modeling out scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in your system, it might end up just getting scaled back ridiculously. Like I've been working with my team on one for one of our existing clients where originally the proposals were pretty big, and pulled in shape files for them, pulled in the prospective new areas, right? Met with their operating team, facilities, capital planning, started pulling in those shape files into the routing software like BusPlanner, and modeling what that would look like. And now it's been scaled back, right? You wouldn't have that ability if you didn't have that open sense of communication and trust, not just with parents, but with leadership and the school board and the executive office at the school district. Transparency builds trust. The more trust you have, the easier this all goes. Okay, let's talk about the long-term impacts of redistricting. So boundary decisions affect costs for years, right? It's not just one cycle. It's not just 1 year. It's not a one-time cost. It is going to be a lot moving forward. So if we're opening up a new school, or we're closing a school, or we're adding, we're just rebalancing the student population, that decisions kind of takes a lot of steps to enact in the first place, right? Where I was just talking about that example where we're pulling in shape files and we're modeling, we're working with folks. It's probably not going to be run back anytime soon. And that does happen, don't get me wrong. But when this change occurs after going through so many steps, oftentimes it's a little bit of more time before another change occurs. So look at the bottom line today. Look at what the bottom line will be if you enact scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. But also remember that'll be recurring. so that if your area is growing leaps and bounds, remember it will probably continue to grow leaps and bounds if the other conditions aren't changing. Inefficiencies, little things that you leave off, like earlier I was talking about special needs transportation or not knowing your numbers cold. Inefficiencies will compound. So if the area is growing and we make an interesting choice and we make a choice that's like we aggregate all the preschoolers to that one central area, that might not be the best decision, right? But if my area is growing, that means I'm going to have even more preschoolers from all over the county start going to that central area. And so over time, that'll compound. And so what might be a costly decision will be a costlier decision years 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So keep that in mind. And then we'll talk about revisiting transportation models post redistricting. When this is all said and done, new school opens, new school closes, what have you, check back in on it. That's going to be your new baseline. And so when we're talking about having your baseline and knowing your numbers cold on your ride times and your bus occupancy, everything you usually have to do for like your state reporting, come back to this and check it again. Check it again 6 months from now. Check it again in a year. Check it monthly. I mean, you can pull some of these reports every single day if you wanted to. There's a lot to track, right? But you can do so and revisit it often to see how that change has impacted, because that's going to be your new baseline. So if you make another change in the future, you're going to track that and learn from each time you go through this rigmarole. And then treat redistricting as an ongoing operational concern. So circle back to it, come back to it, talk about it. When I think about numbers being reported for transportation, and I think about state reporting, track that year over year. See how your information has changed. Have my costs gone up? Have my miles gone up? Have my need for buses gone up? Has my student population gone up? Has it gone down? Has my chronic absenteeism gone up or down? Do I have more buses on the road than I used to? And you're probably already tracking these things, but you might not be tracking it in the context of redistricting. So specifically noting the new schools or the school closures or the school changes. You might be getting right now aggregates or averages just across your entire department. But the more granular you can get with this, the better you'll get your answers as well. And it'll help inform you, and you can take those learnings and you can share them for the next time you go through this. And I talk with transportation leaders all the time that are retiring or near retirement too, and they have so much in their heads and they've been through this song and dance over the last 20, 30, 40 years. But when they think about the team to come who will step up to take their shoes and take their place, they might not have all that information written down. Share your learnings, write them down. I'm not saying you have to build a whole SOP or a whole playbook, but the more you can share and the more you can learn from this process, the more everyone will be better off. If they go to a different district, they can take it with them. If folks from other districts are coming over, pay it forward. And I know there's already so much you got to teach each other in transportation, but this is something that you should keep in mind. All right, let's talk about contingency planning. So contingency planning means, I was talking about scenarios 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've used that example a lot throughout this conversation. And I'll go back to one of our clients that had some pretty big plans and it's now been scaled back quite a bit. You might build out a whole plan. Hey, we're going to open up this new school and it's going to open fall of 2026. I feel like with construction projects, the deadline isn't always the exact right deadline. And sometimes budgets balloon, sometimes time it takes to actually open the doors takes time as well. So you got to have your fallback plan. Earlier, I was talking about, having different databases where you can plan things. So you can have your, hey, this is if everything goes right plan, but make sure you have something in your back pocket in case everything does not go right. If you go and route a bunch of students and you go send them to a new school and that school doesn't end up opening in time, you'll know in advance, right? But it's not fun to have less time to go and route them for fall or for summer. The earlier you can get ahead of that, the better spot you'll be in, right? So always have a contingency, always have a plan B just in case. That's in case of a new school, right? Doesn't open in time. If a school closure is happening, maybe that gets postponed. Maybe there's enough pressure, money's freed up, there's a grant. I mean, I don't know. It can be any number of things. But if you were banking on that school closing and you had already rerouted all those students for the future, maybe at the last minute that doesn't happen. I mean, really, it does occur, folks. Have a contingency plan. And so have different databases, have different plans that if you need to pivot to, you can do so in case of an emergency. Sometimes the timeline changes mid-planning, so you get more of a heads up again, but you're already doing this work. Make sure you don't get caught flat-footed. Maybe the school stays open longer, right? Don't get caught flat-footed. Let's talk about the transportation impacts. So when you're building out these new paths or these new potential plans, let's say your scenarios are accepted or one of your scenarios is accepted, school board's moving forward with it, practice to maintain your legacy routes during the transition until it's all for sure a done deal. Don't lose sight of that. If your drivers are locked into their old assignments, and maybe you're going to shift which buses they drive or which areas they drive, keep them there. And then in the different database for the new scenario, have them assigned differently, right? So again, you have your contingents in place. Having parallel systems, so having two systems at the same time might strain your resources. So I'm not saying to spend all day just routing or building a contingency plan, but you should have something in there. You should have good bones in it, so to bail you out in case you get caught in a sticky situation. And if your schools stay open or they close, that might change a lot of the bell schedule conversations that we've been having too. Model that out and make sure you're tracking it. Make sure you have like a supply and demand curve that you're checking out how that impacts your transportation. If you have one takeaway from this meeting, it's have a backup plan. Have a backup plan. Have a backup plan. You do not want to be in a situation where you don't have a backup plan. And so maybe that's multiple databases. If everything goes to plan, we pick this scenario, we're rolling with this one. Boom. If everything does not go to plan, here's our fallback. That will put you in a good spot. All right, folks, another poll here. What would most help your district prepare for future redistricting? And we will open up this poll. So what would help your district prepare for future redistricting efforts? I should have included a poll in here. Who's going through redistricting right now? Because it always feels like it's top of mind. I mean, I get to talk to a lot of people across the country, and I get to talk to districts that have 10 buses, and I get to talk to districts that have 2,000 buses, and everything in between, right? Or school boards that have 2,000 buses. And they're all kind of like in a different phase. Some are in the middle of it right now. I gave that example earlier of one we're working on, and we at BusPlanner we would like to work really closely with our with our clients. In other places, they know it's coming. There's been talks about it. It's coming in the next year or two. That's a great time to advocate for yourself and start doing some of the preliminary modeling. You're not going to have all your information yet, but you can start getting an idea, and that helps guide and inform conversations as well. So keep that in mind. I'm kind of kicking myself for not including that, but I may ask in the future. So when we talk about what would most help your district prepare for future redistricting, training on scenario planning is popping up the most. I'm also getting some improved data collection systems, and then better transportation modeling is also popping up. Stakeholder communication's been pretty low on this one. I'm saying you don't want to discount it, but I do know some of these decisions are made, or they're made at the school board level, so they kind of handle comms. But transportation is involved in those comms, right? You are communicating with parents on stop changes, on where the time changes, right? Which bus driver they have, which bus is servicing their area, how long they're riding for. All of that does come back to transportation, so it's something to keep in mind, folks. But we'll go forward with training on scenario planning is the big thing. So folks want some extra training. They want to be able to see what it looks like to model. Having those tools that help you model it goes a very long way. And folks, that is the end of my long-winded conversation on redistricting. I do want to open it up for a Q&A session. If you're anything like me, you'll have 40 questions, and some of them will hit you right now, and some of them will hit you 2 in the morning tonight. But please ask away. If you don't have anything to, you can always email me or give me a call. I can share my contact information. And I do have a checklist of things that I keep in mind when I'm talking to the clients that are going through this process. And I built this over the last few weeks, talking with existing clients, talking with fellow consultants in our industry, users of BusPlanner that work at BusPlanner, people that have helped gone through this. We've actually sent folks for redistricting conversations, right, to schools to go meet with parents and go meet with school boards and talk through that from a transportation perspective. It's important for us to make sure that it's important for us here at BusPlanner that our folks feel loved, cared for, and that they have a hand in some of these processes that can be very big. And so we love doing it. And so that's how I put together this document. So over the course of the last few weeks, I've had these conversations, and you might have even received a call from me about it. And I look forward to having more conversations.
Hey, Gus, we're 2 minutes late here, but Marissa actually 2 minutes ago let us know that she's going through it right now, and it starts in September 2026. So we're a couple minutes late, but just want to flag that came in earlier.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's coming. I wish I had a two-way here so I can ask you some more questions. Marissa, maybe I'll give you a ring after. But I am curious about how you folks are thinking about it. Are you doing the models right now? Are you testing the parameters of your barriers or your borders? What is that looking like for you? How are you considering these options? All of these things. If I had one takeaway from this, it's have a contingency. But if I had to cheat and say I have a second takeaway from this, it's know your numbers cold. Pull your reports, pull them year over year, pull information so you know exactly what's happening today And so when you do a change, when you model a boundary change, what is it going to look like tomorrow? Or what is it going to look like in this case in September 2026? And if my miles go up, if my hours go up, if my need for bus drivers goes up, there are real costs associated with that. Track those costs. Like in a system like BusPlanner, we have a way to track those costs. And so it might be what sounds like an innocent decision to let's bring all the preschools together under one building, or all the preschool classrooms under one building in the center of county. All of a sudden it's millions of dollars, right? Because we need to go buy 10 new buses and we need to hire a bunch of new drivers. I mean, it's crazy. Small decisions can have huge financial impacts on transportation teams that already might be under financial stress. And so if it's pulling out of one budget line item for a district, maybe it's showing a good thing, it might show a bad thing for transportation. It might also be the other way around, folks. I feel like maybe I haven't spent enough time on that, but it might be a good thing. It might be you consolidate some routes, you save some more money for the transportation department. It really just depends on your scenario, depends on what's happening, depends on your growth, lots of things to consider. But you really don't know that.
So Gus, Marissa actually shared some more details directly, but she's been practicing different scenarios for bus routes, and she's going from a 2-tier system to a 3-tier system. So nice. Any examples we have that we can kind of provide in terms of best practices there?
I think going from 2-tier to 3-tier, if you can accomplish that, absolutely stellar. What does it mean? It means you're getting more bang for your buck on each bus, right? It means your drivers are driving a good amount of time. Kids are riding on the buses for less time. If you can make your bell times dance that way, absolutely stellar. We have some clients that are running 4-tier, 5-tier systems. What comes to mind is Pasco County, one of our clients out in Florida. We did a webinar with them not too long ago. I want to say it was a handful of months ago, back in 2025. They went from 430 buses to 270, I think it is today, doing things like this, like increasing their tiers. That is a great ROI mechanism. If you can model that and you can do extra tiers, you can save a lot of money. Realigning the grades you're talking about, shifting those from different buildings. In a system like BusPlanner, how we consider it is each school has grade assignments, right? So it might be pre-K through 5 and 6, 7, 8 for a middle, 9, 10, 11, 12, high school. Now you might have some alternate schools, junior colleges, or technical schools that kids go to in the afternoon. All of those rules and all those rules impact your boundaries, which kids are where. You might have pockets where it's mostly a very young population, mostly elementary school age students, and you might have other parts of town that are mostly high schoolers. You really don't know until you put the demographics on the map and you start checking it out. And so maybe it makes sense to shift those grades. And so instead of a 6, 7, 8 middle school, now you're a 7, 8 middle school, and the 6th graders are going to start going to the elementary school nearby. There's a ton of different ways to model this. It's important to consider all of those variables and model it a bunch of different ways. Don't feel married to one version. Play with it, tweak it on the margins, and then compare those numbers. And so if those numbers go up, your miles, your hours, your cost, keep track of that too.
Yeah,
so I'm going to give you a ring. I want to get in the weeds with you on this.
Yeah. So Melissa actually, ton of content here, but they're realigning grades to different buildings and lessening the amount of buses for 2 schools that they currently run, given that they're a smaller district. So they just started a full day kindergarten this year, and they're going to be those folks are going to be eligible for busing next year if they live in an eligible busing zone as well.
Thanks. I know. So Oregon just went statewide with kindergarten, right? That's like another example. And so they had to do a big push around like, what does it look like to remodel these things? What does it mean to be eligible? So, I mean, that's a component of redistricting we didn't even talk about, right? But your district or your transportation team might have rules around walkability. So, hey, an elementary school student can't walk more than 2/10 of a mile. A middle schooler can't walk more than 3/10. Everyone's got different rules on this. And then an elementary school student needs to live within a mile of the elementary school or a mile and a half from the middle, and that impacts their transportation. You should be able to model those things for eligibility. That'll also impact your decisions on school openings, school closures, and new program expansions. I am very glad that you were able to consolidate those runs. That's pretty cool. Help save some money. We're seeing a lot of folks facing budget stresses across the country, and so it's cool you're able to model those. Oh, New Jersey, interesting. Every state's different. So BusPlanner is pretty configurable. This is why I have to speak generally in principles, because every state's going to have its own rules. General transportation is very similar across state lines, but then you get these very interesting caveats and these very interesting rule changes across state lines. And even like county to county, your neighbors might be doing something completely different than you. Or in some places it's city to city. I keep saying county, but it's city to city. Or maybe it's just like area across state lines. There's no rhyme or reason to why some states have been the way they are, but they have different rules. And so you need to have a system that's pretty configurable to accommodate all those different rules. Configuration is the name of the game. Your neighbors might be doing something completely different than you. The same general rules might apply, but they might be doing completely different processes. And so you kind of need something that accommodates the different processes. And that's what I get to have a lot of fun at BusPlanner working on projects like that, figuring out the ins and outs of the way you want your system to run and getting it set up that way. But I'll get off my BusPlanner soapbox here. Any other questions, folks? Anything else coming through? Am I missing anything? I see a raised hand. Oh, Marissa, that's you. Gotcha.
Gus, we just got one. This is from Ben. Our district is in the middle of a redistricting process right now, and transportation wasn't included in the planning committee from the start. How can we put ourselves in the conversation?
Is that decision done? Like, is it all rubber stamped? It's officially happening? Because if so, right now you need to model what that actually looks like. You need to do the work of building the routes out. There is some flexibility on the margins here around, yes, the decision was made, we're going to open up this school, as an example, and now we need to route it. There's still a lot of room there within transportation for you. Now you have to route it. So it might be, hey, which path are we going to take? What are we going to optimize? Can we consolidate routes now that we have this new decision? So the decision might have been made already, but there are still things that you have to do in transportation now that you still have some wiggle room and you can make some decisions, right? You know the end goal, but you don't quite know how you're going to get there yet. And that's the importance of modeling and testing what that might look like. Same as your day-to-day routing. I would encourage you, though, to check how this is going to change your numbers. I know I'm beating the horse to death here, but check your current data, see what it's going to look like, give your best bet on the model you want to go with the new school opening up or the school closing or what have you. And see how that changes your numbers. And then maybe the decision's already made, but you can go advocate for more budget because now you might need more budget. Model that out, share your findings. Again, trust and openness will get you a very long way as a general rule of thumb. So Ben, I'm wishing you luck. We can have a conversation if you want. It's important, though, that you know those numbers cold. And also, don't forget the contingency plan.
So I think we have time for one last one. And our district was dealing with a situation where its new school was supposed to open this fall, but is now delayed. You touched on contingency planning. Is there any way that BusPlanner can help with that?
Yeah. So take your daily routes, take your normal, have your what we call in production database, right? This is your database that's got all your proper kids going to the right places at the right times, your day to day, right? Use things like grade rollovers. So at the end of the school year, we anticipate, fourth graders are going to become fifth graders and 10th graders are going to become 11th graders, and probably staying at the same school. So you can model that. You can allow this grade rollover to occur. It'll happen automatically at a certain date if you set it that way. It'll do that rollover. And so you still have the bones of what it would have been without the new change already in place. So if that change falls through, you have the bones. And you're not starting from scratch and scrambling at the last minute. Oftentimes you won't scramble at the last minute. You'll get some sort of heads up, but it just means you don't have to spend a lot of time over summer overly stressed trying to get a lot done. And we talk about hell week before school starts, right? Where everyone's kind of working. We don't want to make it like a hell month. We want to try and reduce that as much as possible. Some things are out of your hands. Sometimes the school doesn't tell you information until the very last minute, right? So you got to do everything you can in advance to make that easier. And that's kind of what we're gunning for. I don't see anything else. Any other questions, folks?
I think we're good. We're good to go, Gus. If you want to wrap it up.
Alrighty. Well, everyone, I appreciate your time. You can learn more about us at busplanner.com. Conversations with people across the country is how I get to do these webinars. I get to learn from folks. I get to have conversations. I get to do implementations. It's honestly an amazing job. I love doing it. So if you want to have a conversation with me, love to have a conversation. Learn more about us. Talk with us. I mean, we're at all the big trade shows, and look forward to hearing from you. We'll send this. So usually it takes a couple of weeks for our recording to go live. So it'll be put on YouTube and on our website, busplanner.com. So when that goes out, you'll get a message. And then again, I have a checklist that I'll be able to send you on things to consider when you're going through redistricting. I hope this was helpful. I love the opportunity to have conversations like this, and I appreciate your time.